Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is December 1st, Thursday, December 1st, 2016. Happy December, everybody. The headphone volume level just dropped precipitously all of a sudden. I think it's time for some new headphones. So why don't you all head to Patreon and sign up so that we can get some new headphones. Headphones is a not inconsiderable expense, but I think maybe we can tinker with these things. I'm not ready to throw them out just yet. I still am a believer in the ability to repair electronics, though why, I have no idea. I haven't been able to fix anything in probably 25 years. I don't think they make stuff fixable anymore. All right, and I have to answer a text on my phone. Firefox wants to be on my phone. Isn't that great? I didn't even ask him to do it. I wonder if Donald Trump paid him any money to move into my phone. We're going to have to talk about that one today. We mentioned it yesterday. We didn't get around to it, but the carrier deal just looks dumber and dumber. I mean, it's not terrible, but it's only the exact opposite of what Donald Trump campaigned on. You may recall that the campaign promise, anyway, was that if a U.S. company were to move jobs out of the United States, Trump's plan, he never really nailed down exactly what rate he was going to use, but his plan was, I'll hit him with a tax. You move jobs out of the country, I'm going to increase taxes on you. And it was never clear even whether that was supposed to be an excise tax of some, an importation, a tariff on their goods coming back into the United States, a tax on their net income. I don't know what that was supposed to be, but the idea is they were going to get hit with a tax if they moved jobs out of the United States. And here we are with Carrier being celebrated, by the way, almost across the major traditional media as a win, an important strategic win for Trump and his incoming transition team. Bottom line is they're keeping 1,000 jobs in the United States in this plant, yes, but moving, as previously planned, 2,000 anyway. So there's 2,000 jobs moving out of the U.S., 1,000 staying, twice as many leaving as are staying, and they're getting a tax cut. Right? Sort of feels like the opposite of the old, if you move jobs out of the United States, I'll hit you with a tax increase. But hey, what do I know? The media says it's a win, and that's that. Poor media, getting beat up on from all sides. I saw an interesting video clip today that I'll share with you perhaps a little bit later on, just to give you an idea of, you probably already know where people's heads are these days. This is a clip in particular with, I guess, one of the focus group type panels with CNN and the Trump voters going on and on about how they know for sure that millions and millions of illegal votes were cast by non-citizens, probably all in California, but when they're probed for specifics, they have to sit there and answer pointed questions about what they actually believe. One, they retreat from their statements pretty quickly, and two, they blame it all on the media told me it's your fault. Well, not really always the case. Anyway, we got to check in on all those stories and round them all up. Bill in Portland, Maine has started us with a morning tweet letting you know that Daily Coast Radio is live now. You know that if you're listening. If you're listening by podcast, Daily Coast Radio is podcast now, or was podcast earlier and is now being played at your convenience. Whatever, however you want to put it. Kagro X, that's me, and if you want to reach me, and you want to reach me during the show and change the direction of the show, telling me it sucks or it's great, or longer Greg segments, or where's Josie, or what happened to Joan, or won't you give me the microphone instead of you, all those things can be forwarded to me on Twitter. You can reach me at KagroX, K-A-G-R-O-X, and do attach the hashtag KITM so that your comment stays up on my screen a little bit longer. So we're live, and it's time for me to neuter Breitbart boycott by eating 100 bowls of Kellogg's cereal, which I'm going to do beginning now. What was the? Wasn't there a? I'm trying to think. There was a couple of cereal. There's a couple of Kellogg cereals out there with numbers in them. I got to figure out how many bowls of that you need to make it to 100. Maybe I can cut the number down. I eat Kellogg cereal all the time anyway, so I can't really contribute much in the way of countering the boycott. But I don't care, and neither does Kellogg's really. That's the latest of the boycott stories. The right is always boycotting something and then crying when the left boycott something. You're against their First Amendment rights. I'm not really sure how they, sustain that kind of dissonance, but they do it all the time, so I guess it's nothing to be terribly surprised by. But yeah, I guess the deal is, without reading anything about it, because I would give you a clip on it, but who cares? Anyway, Kellogg's, the cereal company, decided they didn't want to advertise on Breitbart anymore. Why they're advertising on Breitbart at all, I have no idea. Of all the places they could be advertising online. But I guess they thought, they reach millions of loyal readers who believe anything they see on Breitbart. I guess that's a pretty attractive forum for an advertiser. But then they realized, just brand-wise, maybe this is not the thing. So they decided they'll spend their advertising dollars elsewhere. And I guess Breitbart is trying to get, I don't know whether Breitbart is really trying to do it, but anyway, the readers are incensed about it. Now they say they're going to boycott Kellogg's cereals. You don't really have a whole hell of a lot of choice in breakfast cereal world as it is. I mean, I guess you can go over to General Mills, but I don't know. And then, of course, the counter is, left-leaning folks saying, well, I'm going to go buy Kellogg's cereals. Odds are there are Kellogg's cereals in your pantry as it is, and it's not going to make a great deal of difference. But my kids love the Kellogg's cereals. They also like Lucky Charms, which is a General Mills cereal. So I don't know what my political messaging is on this thing, but I guess I don't know how the coffee boycott is going, but I thought maybe we could all go over to Starbucks, as I suggested today, and tell them our name is Kellogg's. Or somebody else suggested, tell them your full name is Kellogg Hamilton, and make them write that on the cup. And that'll teach you, you lamos, I owned you by telling the Starbucks barista my name was something, and I can't imagine running into a Starbucks barista who could care less what name I tell him to put on the cup. Put Mast on, it doesn't matter. Pick anything. So whatever you want, it's on the cup. All right. Well, Greg, what do you want in your cup this morning? Greg's working.
Well, let's talk about John Harvey Kellogg.
All right. Sounds like a great guy. He shredded and soaked corn and then sprayed it onto a screen and scraped it off.
He did. He was a medical doctor. This is from Wikipedia, from Battle Creek, Michigan.
Yes.
Remember Kellogg's of Battle Creek? That's how they used to advertise it on the Beverly Hillbillies.
Right.
Who ran a sanitarium using holistic methods with particular focus on nutrition, enemas, and exercise.
Yo.
It wasn't Kellogg cereal enemas,
They're
but
not just for
he
breakfast
invented
anymore.
the cornflake.
He did. The cornflake enema, which is uncomfortable.
So he was born in Tyrone, Michigan, and he had a very interesting view on a lot of different things, but of course he's absolutely most famous for his cereals.
Well,
he
that's
invented
what you
cornflakes in 1878.
That's a good invention. If you think a colonoscopy is uncomfortable, try the cornflakes.
Well, interestingly, the cereal
Take
was
them out of
first
the box.
called Granula.
Yes. What?
Granula, which he later changed to Granola.
Oh, okay. That's
But
better.
because of patent rights on other granolas, he had to change the name to cornflakes.
Cornflakes was granola?
Yeah, and then these cornflakes were invented as part of his, this is what Wikipedia says, as part of his health regimen to prevent masturbation.
What is going on with this guy?
His belief was that bland foods would decrease or prevent excitement and arousal.
At breakfast?
Yeah.
All right.
So there's a long history of cornflakes
Man.
that if you really know about all the details.
Breakfast really is the most important
And I'm
meal
not
of the
sure
day.
all the details are appropriate for a family-friendly radio
None
show.
of them have been to this point. But
Yeah.
go ahead. By all means. What
Anyway,
else
so
can
he
you
and his
prevent
brother
it? What could
invent
get
cornflakes.
worse?
Then they argue over the recipe because, you know why?
That doesn't work for masturbation. Put corn in it. What,
Yeah,
like
but,
that?
but you know why they argued?
What? Why?
Because Will wanted to do Frosted Flakes.
Oh. What would that prevent?
I don't know. So Will started his own company, the Battle Creek Toasted Cornflake Company, which became the Kellogg Company. And then there was a decades-long feud.
Damn.
John formed the Battle Creek Food Company to battle the Battle Creek Toasted Cornflake Company.
That's the battle they're talking about.
Right.
I knew it.
And then one of his patients, C.W. Post, got sick of the whole thing, so he started his own cereal company, Post Cereals, selling a rival brand of cornflakes.
And General Mills commanded the battle. Battle
Exactly. So anyway, there's this whole section here on masturbation prevention, which I'm not going to go over. But
You're not.
Well, you can. You know, it's your show.
Breakfast.
But I just wanted you to know that there's a whole history about cornflakes that has, interesting precedent here and priors.
That is. I wonder.
So if Kellogg has trouble with Breitbart, well, all I'm saying is you can't know where you're going until you know where you've been.
I still don't know where this is going.
It's just, fascinating history that nobody talks about.
So.
Now it's a corporate brand, and, nobody talks about its origins anymore, and it doesn't matter, and it's all true. But it's interesting. It says part of history that people just don't want to remember.
No. Kellogg's anti-masturbation flakes doesn't sell.
It doesn't, but also the whole big battle between him and his brother over patents and who's the real cornflake, creator here.
They are both cornflakes.
And how Frosted Flakes nearly disrupted a Michigan family over business.
Oh, okay, not over the. All right, well, I wonder what people were eating that was causing them to masturbate so much at breakfast.
Like, I don't know, sausages? But there's a lot of back then. Let's just say American medicine wasn't exactly. Completely the same. Wherever you went, everybody had their own methods of doing things, and there was no uniformity to it, and it wasn't based on outcomes, and, it wasn't based on data. And then there was a whole group of reforms to reform the medical schools in the early 20th century. And now we have what we have today, which is the, medical industrial complex.
Yeah. Well, okay. I don't even know how to
it's not a direct link, but you can trace, the whole origins from cornflakes to the AMA, endorsing Tom Price. It's just a lot of things have happened over the last 100 years.
I'm curious.
We don't have time for all of it in the show, but it's just one of those interesting things.
I wonder what Fruit Loops are supposed to prevent.
Yeah, Fruit Loops. Let's not even talk about Fruit Loops.
Wow. Okay. Look at this. Our friend now Green DuPage, and I guess the scratched out blue part has gone. Now it's Muslim Green DuPage.
Okay.
I guess it looks like they had a patent of some kind on some devices as well that people wore. Looks like companion male and female sort of chastity belts that I guess they went with your breakfast.
Yeah, I guess, far more interesting than
maybe
you would think just looking at a bland box of cornflakes.
Yeah, they should have that on the back. Send in your box tops and get, all right, well, this is a hell of a, I would, I'm thinking about boycotting now.
Yeah. Anyway, in the meantime, Clinton's lead in the popular vote is up to more than 2.5 million votes. And one of those interesting factoids is that I guess in California, Clinton is leading something. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. Something like 60-30. The point being that Trump, as a percentage of vote, is dropping in California, and he's threatening Alf Landon for the worst performance by a Republican in a presidential election in California.
He ate cats.
Alf. Landon currently has the record.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's good to break a record.
Yeah, but Trump is closing in.
Good for you. You keep
right now. Her lead is 5 times the size of Al Gore's in 2000. So no, this doesn't change the legitimacy of the election, but it has important repercussions in regard to discussing whether or not Trump has a mandate. Remember, if a Democrat wins 51 to 42, for the sake of argument, that's a close race, and you have to pay attention to what the other side's losing voters really wanted. But if a Republican wins 47-46, it's a mandate, and you can do whatever you want, and we're in power, and screw you.
Yes, that is usually the way it works.
Mm-hmm.
And I blame Kellogg's.
Well, they run the country like they run the House. In the Senate, there's different rules.
Right.
So from a mindset, Senate, Democrats try to run the country like it was the Senate, and Republicans try to run the country like it's the House. And why do they do it in the House? Because they can.
Yeah. Well, that's a good analogy. We should keep that. I will.
Yeah, the other side of the coin, as you have pointed out to us many, many times, is the last thing in the world you want to be is in the minority in the House, because it's like, what frustration.
Yeah, there's really not too much you can do there. You can have a good time pointing out the mistakes, but getting things done, part of the job is out.
You can say a lot of things, but you really can't do anything.
And if you do, the majority puts their name on it and says they did it. So it's a little frustrating.
Right. Okay, so here's some more stuff. This is new data from Kaiser. Dan Diamond is tweeting us this morning, and let me just add this at the very end there, right after the John Harvey Kellogg reference there. So this is a tweet from Dan Diamond. If you click on it, you'll see this really interesting graph here. Since the election, fewer Republicans say they want the Affordable Care Act repealed, while more say they want it scaled back. Among Republicans, what would you like to see President-elect Donald Trump and the next Congress do when it comes to the health care law? October 2016, 69% of Republicans wanted to repeal the entire law. After the election, that's down to 52.
Yes.
I didn't think we were going to win. Now they're going to win. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Right? Scale back the law, 11% before, now it's 24.
Okay.
Okay. There's still, maybe 25% total. Expand what the law does, 9%, and move forward as is, 6%, or I don't know. But the percentage who just absolutely are demanding that it be repealed is a bare majority of Republicans. So it's interesting.
Oh yeah, that's true. That might not. It's in danger of failing the old Hastert rule.
Exactly what I was thinking of when I was looking at it. It's very close to failing the Hastert rule, so even among Republicans. And that certainly has implications when you're talking about Medicare and Medicaid, which is part of this. So the most important factors to voters in the 2016 presidential election, according to this Kaiser poll, new Kaiser poll, 82% direction the country was headed, 75% jobs in the economy, 68% health care. Now, that 82% is all voters, and, of course, the direction the country is headed is a phenomenally difficult thing to interpret.
Yes, particularly right now.
Was it because it was becoming less white? Was it because it was not doing as well with the economy? Was it because ISIS is a threat? What do they mean when they say the direction the country is headed? You don't know. And that's why the right direction, wrong direction is so difficult to really interpret at times. We know when we break it down that, for example, even looking at the health care law, a lot of Democrats didn't like it because it didn't go far enough, which is not the same thing as Republicans not liking it because it went too far. Mm-hmm. Anyway, health care was 68% third after the jobs in the economy. And for Trump voters, the biggest problem was the direction the country's headed, 38%. But for Clinton voters, the biggest problem was Donald Trump's personal characteristics.
Okay.
So, according to this poll, Hillary Clinton's personal characteristics were only 16%, whereas the direction the country's headed was 38%, and jobs in the economy were 19%. Whereas with Clinton voters, 31% said Donald Trump's personal characteristics, 22% said the direction of the country, and 12% said jobs in the economy. It wasn't really health care, so people didn't run on health care, and they didn't vote on health care, and so don't worry, Republicans will claim a mandate.
Yeah. Simple enough, easy to understand.
Are they divided? Sure, they're divided. They've always been divided. Public divided on view of the health care law. Let me just actually give you the URL so you can follow along. And I'm down to figure 3 here. And it turns out that for the first time in a long time, the health care law is actually more favorable than unfavorable. It looks. Not quite. Right now it's 45-43. In October, it was 45-45. And now it's 45 unfavorable and 43 favorable. But very close to that, a theoretic example I was given to you in terms of how Republicans deem it a mandate. Deem and pass, right? Deem it a mandate because, they decided it is. But here's what's really going on. Figure 4 here. Americans divided on ACA next steps. Expand what the law does, 30%.
Okay.
Repeal the entire law, 26%.
Hmm.
Move forward with implementing the law as is, 19%. Scale back what the law does, 17%. So the plurality is actually with leaving the law alone or making it better. That's 49%.
Yes.
Repeal the entire law or scale it back, that's 43. So 49 to 43, people actually either want to keep the law or make it better. And, a smaller number want to get rid of it or scale it back. But they won, so they get to do what they want.
Well, that's about the same. It's kind of how the election came out. There's 49 on one side and 43 on the other. 43 wins.
But the 43 won, and so they get to do what they want and claim a mandate.
Yay. By the way, they do have a slight advantage if you include people who don't know anything about it or...
Well, you include the don't know
some
any
other
side.
things. Yeah, sure, but why don't we just... It's a mandate. Give it to the people with the mandate.
Now, again, and this is the problem, because remember, Eric Cantor, what was it, 7 years ago? 6 years ago, 5 years ago, whenever he was there, said, we have a replacement coming in just a few weeks.
Yes, well, that's still true.
In just a few weeks.
Yeah.
Actually, it may take years. Why is that relevant? Among those who want
Years are made of weeks.
the ACA repealed, years are made of minutes, so it'll be coming any minute.
Yes.
Among those who want ACA repealed, 2/3 want it replaced with a Republican-sponsored alternative.
Okay.
What's the alternative?
I don't know. There isn't. If it's repealed, it'll be a Republican-sponsored replacement, if there is one.
If there is one.
Yeah. There's
Right.
nothing is a good replacement.
Okay, and among the 26% who want the ACA repealed, some attitudes are malleable.
What?
Asked of the 26% who say they would like to see lawmakers repeal the entire law, what if you heard that insurance companies would be able to deny coverage to people with pre-existing conditions if the law was repealed?
Which they would.
Of those who want it repealed, all of a sudden 38% now oppose repealing the law.
Oh. All right.
Okay. They're less concerned that 20 million Americans who have gotten health insurance get kicked off. Only 19% change their mind when they hear that. But 38% change their mind if they hear that the pre-existing conditions go away.
Well, yeah, I get. All right. A good follow-up would be, I see that you're less concerned about the number of millions of people who would be kicked off or lose their insurance.
But
do you
what
know
if it were your
why
brother-in-law? Did you
they
know
were
that?
losing their insurance? Well, there's that,
What
certainly.
if your kids?
And you just told me that you were concerned about the pre-existing condition thing. Who do you think is going to lose their insurance?
Right.
How could you say you're concerned about the pre-existing condition thing and then not about what the result of the pre-existing condition issue is? No. Okay.
So let me just set some terms of debate here for going forward, because I do think it's important. I talk to conservatives all the time on Twitter every morning and evening and afternoon and whenever I'm on. And I talk to conservatives offline, of course, all the time. And I talk to health policy wonks because I'm interested in this, being a doc and all that. And I don't mind, but I can live with losing an argument about how to do this. There are progressive ways to do it, which involve using the government more. There are conservative ways to do this, which involve using the government less. But whether you do a market-based way to do it, which I do not prefer, but can lose the argument and still see it done, or whether you prefer to do it in a more equitable way that saves money and do it a Medicare for all or single payer, whatever, that is a worthy argument to have, and, let's have it on the merits. What's difficult about this whole discussion now is not how do you cover people, what's the best way. It's whether to cover people. And the whole frustration about this discussion now in the losing but winning side, that is to say non-majority but winning side, now setting the terms of the argument, it's whether people should be covered. Like, should people really continue to get Medicare? Should people really continue to get Medicaid? Should they really continue to be covered? And that's a horrible discussion to have.
It's not.
When you talk about the Overton window and moving the discussion, that's just a horrible place to even have that discussion. That should be settled. Whether how ought to be the discussion on the table. They don't think so, but there will be a political price to pay if they start trying to take away people's health care. I just don't think that the Trump administration has really grasped that. I'm not even sure Paul Ryan has.
Yeah, well, it was safe for him to propose that for a long time.
Yeah, as long as it's not going to get done, it's totally safe.
Yeah. Now he's got to decide on whether to deliver. So I do expect that they will moderate the outcomes. They will insist that they're not moderating them, and we shouldn't accept them because they're moderated. It's just
wait. Isn't it the other way around, that they don't moderate the outcomes, but they claim they are?
Oh well, there's sometimes that. I just expect that when it comes to getting things through,
we're not really all right. We're really nice guys.
Yeah.
It's the same people who are promoting white nationalism and, as we like to call them these days, Nazis. But hey, we're all fuzzy and warm, and let's have some puff reviews, and everything changes. But our core beliefs haven't changed one iota, and what we're trying to do hasn't changed one iota. Why is this different? Why would we think that they are going to be any less hardcore about trying to remove stuff that they said that they were going to remove when they said they were going to try and remove it?
Well, they don't all consider themselves alt-righters, for one thing. I mean, hammering anything through Congress, I mean, it's entirely possible that the House, I could see certainly insisting at first blush that they not moderate at all, and then finding that they can't get their bills through the Senate.
Like that's never happened before, right?
Right. So, we'll see. It's not that I'm not worried about it. I'm worried because I'm left hoping that that's what happens, and even that is not very good. And I don't know. I mean, we'll have to see what comes out of it, but the political science isn't going to help us figure out much right now. I mean, in a world where our post-fact world, I don't know that political science is as useful a tool for predictive purposes.
Right, but here is something that is, and it isn't political science, it's practical politics. It is phenomenally difficult, and has been for the past 50 years, if not longer, to actually pass health care reform.
Yes. And
just because Trump won the election doesn't make it any easier to do. And part of the reason that Eric Cantor failed in his "it's going to be available in weeks," and part of the reason Congress has never really passed an alternative, a Republican alternative, even with a Republican Congress, to Obamacare, is that it's really difficult to round up the votes and then get it through the Senate as well as the House. It's just really hard. It's still really hard.
Yeah. Well, we'll watch them struggle with it, I guess. That's all we're going to be allowed to do.
Right. Again, so I'm just simply saying, yes, we will. And no, you can't predict it. But this is one of those cases where don't watch what they say, watch what they do. Yes.
It will be a long time before they do anything, but stay focused.
Yeah. It starts with the confirmation hearings, I guess, for Tom Price.
Yes.
A lot of this stuff's going to be on the table because Democrats have already signaled interest in making it be on the table.
Very true.
Okay, what else we have here? Here's a case from Matt Iglesias, the case for normalizing Trump.
Case for normalizing Trump.
Right. Stop worrying about his foreign policy and don't get distracted by his, flag-burning tweets. Stick with policy.
Yeah.
And beat him on policy. Several students of authoritarian populist movements abroad have a different message, writes Iglesias. To beat Trump, what his opponents need to do is practice ordinary humdrum politics. The boring kind of stuff that's the day-to-day stuff that still matters and still has to be done. Committee work, Populists in office thrive on a circus-like atmosphere that casts a populist leader as persecuted by media and political elites who are obsessed with his uncouth behavior while he's busy doing the people's work. To beat Trump, progressives will need to do as much as they can to get American politics out of reality show mode. Make it boring, in other words. I say. Trump genuinely does pose threats to the integrity of American institutions and political norms, but he does so largely because his nascent administration is sustained by support from the institutional Republican Party. Yes, let us never forget, the Republican Party is responsible for Trump, not Democrats and not Clinton. and its standard business and interest group supporters, which is why the American Medical Association is supporting Tom Price. They want doctors to be able to make more money. Alongside the wacky tweets and personal feuds, Trump is pursuing a policy agenda whose implications are overwhelmingly favorable to rich people, which we should not lose focus with, a couple articles on that, and business owners. His opponents need to talk about this policy agenda, and they need to develop their own alternative agenda and make the case it'll better serve the needs of average people. To do that, they need to get out of the habit of being reflexively baited into tweet-based arguments that happen on the terrain of Trump's choosing and serve to endlessly reinscribe the narrative of a champion of the working class surrounded by media vipers. Now, companion article to that in the Washington Post by Dana Milbank, stick a sterling fork in Trump's populism because he's appointing the richest cabinet ever.
Yes.
He ate dinner with Mitt Romney when the billionaire met the three-quarters of a billionaire.
Yes.
And then there's three other billionaires in Trump's cabinet. There's Education Secretary Betsy DeVos would be Education Secretary. There's Wilbur Ross at Commerce, he of the mine disasters, and Deputy Commerce Choice Todd Ricketts, whose family fortune is also in the billions. Harold Hamm, possible energy secretary, is worth $15 billion. And remember Trump's talk about taking on the elites and the well-connected? Well, there's an old joke in New York City about investment bankers, which is only partially a joke. There are some really obnoxious investment bankers, males, masters in the universe.
Right, sure.
Who go to bars and hit on women and drop their card, their business card, because, like, I'm Morgan Stanley, and so you should go out with me. And the New York City response is for the women to look up the card and throw it back in the guy's face and say, I only date people from Goldman Sachs. And, the idea that these are the people that this populist is going to take and put right back in power along with the lobbyists, and that, therefore, is going to drain the swamp, is a whole lot more like Dr. Trump's amazing swamp water. Yeah. It cures everything from colds to cancer. And just, buy it here. I'll keep selling you this stuff, and that's how we'll drain the swamp. I'll just, sell it to you little by little, and you won't even notice.
I think your roundup didn't even mention, although I'm sure you had it in mind, the Treasury Secretary, how does he say that name? Mnuchin?
Steve Mnuchin, I have that there. Yeah. Trump's top fundraiser eyes the deal of a lifetime. Steve Mnuchin might have a shot at Treasury Secretary, but his Wall Street pedigree makes him the type Donald Trump fans love to hate. But there is a cute little anecdote in there.
Oh?
That's actually the next one right after that, I think. Nope, it's the third one after that. Mnuchin was born into a level of privilege that makes Trump's deluxe childhood look ordinary.
Yes.
His grandfather, an attorney, co-founded a yacht club in the Hamptons. His father was a top Goldman Sachs trader who later became an art dealer. Mnuchin followed his father to Yale, where he lived in the Old Taft Hotel with Eddie Lampert, now a billionaire investor, and Sam Chalabi, whose uncle Ahmed Chalabi later ran the Iraqi National Congress. Mnuchin drove a Porsche in college, two friends say. His classmate Michael Danziger, an heir to a pharmaceutical fortune, says he was also tapped to join Skull and Bones, but turned down the secret society. You're going to live to regret this, he recalls Mnuchin saying. Danziger, who knew his classmate was headed into finances, he answered, you put the douche in fiduciary. Mnuchin says the exchange never happened.
Of course not. Nothing ever. Now, I read that clip the other day, and as I had to tweet out, please, someone stop all the populism.
Yeah.
But
he got summer jobs at Salomon Brothers before graduating from Yale.
Sure.
His bosses at the bank asked why they should bring him on. Well, you're just going to end up going to Goldman Sachs, Mnuchin remembers one telling him. I said, no, I really don't want to go to Goldman Sachs. I'm going to do something different. He went to Goldman Sachs.
Yeah, well, they knew him better than he did.
Right.
I was confused
I'm just
by that
pointing
clip,
out on the pyramid of power and influence. Goldman Sachs is at the top. Morgan Stanley and all these others are just below.
I guess that's true.
Goldmine Sachs or Government Sachs, some of the nicknames they have.
Now there's another. I mean, the current is it the current president or CEO perhaps of Goldman Sachs, Cohn, who's also being looked at for I haven't tracked that one. I saw that mentioned the other day. But
I haven't been keeping track of all of them. There's just too many.
But Mnuchin's story there, or does he just drop the M? Is it just Mnuchin? Anyway.
I don't know.
That's all I can do. The story about Skull and
He
Bones.
hires people to pronounce it for him.
That's true. Are they saying he did, or that Mnuchin did or didn't join Skull and Bones?
He did.
Okay, he did. And
yeah,
it's
and
his
his
roommate who didn't, and it's Mnuchin who said, "You'll live to regret this." Okay.
Correct.
All right. Well.
And the douche and fiduciary was the comeback from the roommate who said, come on.
Right.
Don't be a complete total jerk, even though you're a complete and total jerk.
Too late for that. So plenty of Goldman Sachs in there, and I've seen a couple of tweets that purport to be from Trump supporters, confused, baffled, upset about all of this. I don't know how many.
They're not
tribal.
Really, they don't just say, "Okay, well, it's okay because our guy's doing it."
Usually, so I'm not 100% sure those are really it. And who knows? I mean, with these alt-right wackos out there, and I mean, I guess harkening back to the 4chan progenitors of the alt-right, they may just be out there saying, let's make fake accounts that pretend to be Trump supporters crying about it so that normies think we're upset, but we're really not. Who knows with these guys? There's only 10.
Anyway, not to forget, I'll just end with the idea here that Dana Milbank has a column about the election really was rigged, but of course it was about voter suppression, which we should not forget. And kind of an interesting piece from E.J. Dionne. Democrats skip the Civil War. Stop having the Clinton and the Bernie faction stop arguing with each other. And stop worrying about whether or not, people like Mark Lilla, who's a Columbia University political philosopher who famously wrote about how Democrats have to get away from identity politics. And EJ's basic point is, just forget about all of that. You can remember white working class voters and include them without excluding people of color. If they don't want to come along, fine, but it doesn't mean that your philosophy has to exclude them. And there's nothing wrong with spending a little more time, paying a little bit more attention to rural voters. As we've talked about on the show many times, the famous Cracked article, which talked about how rural voters feel disrespected by the coastal elites. And that's fine. I mean, that shouldn't happen. The big tent should include everybody, or at least invite everybody. If they don't want to come in, that's their problem. And you can do that without, excluding people of color. So it would be wrong to go after white working class voters, as if somehow that's not identity politics, to the exclusion of people who now feel threatened and marginalized even when they did before. But there's nothing wrong with including everybody. And it doesn't have to be a big civil war. It doesn't have to be a big philosophical discussion about, did Clinton rely too much on women voters as opposed to voters? Well, actually, she won by 2.5 million votes. So really, it was a question of how the campaign focused their efforts in the places they lost, particularly Florida, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, and North Carolina, those 5 states. And in fact, in a couple of those states, including Wisconsin and Florida and North Carolina, there's no question that voter suppression was a big part of what happened.
No doubt about it.
Wisconsin with the voter ID, Florida with kicking millions of people off the rolls, and North Carolina, with incredible restrictions, including stuff that's now in court, and court saying that you got to undo some of your incredibly gerrymandered voting districts.
Yes, that's happening too. North Carolina, big case, and I guess I took note of this one, slated to perhaps order special elections for Congress in
it's a big deal. And so, let us not forget that voter suppression was a good deal of the reason why she lost in some of these states.
Yes.
Which is not to delegitimize the fact that Trump actually won. If you bring up that Clinton won by 2.5 million votes and counting, and that Trump is getting Alf Landon numbers in California, still doesn't change the fact that he's going to be sitting in the White House. Nobody's saying that. Maybe Jill Stein, but I'm not. Again, it gets back to this whole discussion that we had at the beginning of the segment about mandates and what they mean. You win by that much.
Yeah.
And your opponent doesn't have a real mandate.
Yeah, actually, make a good point to bring up as counterpoint to things like this CNN panel where you have the Trump supporters insisting that millions of illegal votes were cast by non-citizens. It'd be worth...
Said the paid political
Yes.
results that were on there as independent analysts, yes.
Is that right?
I don't know.
I mean,
if they're
it's
Trump
usually-
supporters on CNN, aren't they getting paid?
This is... these are, I think, supposed to be a panel of your average voters, but that has never always successfully screened out people who weren't at least local Republican chairs or what have you.
Yeah, in other words, Republican, I haven't made up my mind yet, swing voters.
Yes, right. Things like that. It's the same sorts of panel.
Yeah.
But it would be, I mean, the CNN, whoever the reporter was who was handling the panel, I think did a good job in pushing back a little bit. But it would be interesting, by the way, to maybe have a panel that wasn't all Trump voters or to give the ability to somebody on the panel who was a Democratic voter to say, as long as we're talking about shenanigans at the polls, well, one thing is clear. You don't have any actual proof of this that you allege, but whereas there is actual proof of there were millions of people who are citizens and always have been citizens and whose parents and grandparents, etc., were citizens who wanted to vote, showed up, tried to vote, and were denied the right to vote because of any number of ridiculous laws, and many of these cases ended up being mistaken identity. That was all that it required, was that you have the same surname as somebody who, though a citizen, is not allowed to vote because at one point in the past they were convicted of a crime, whether rightly, wrongly, based on race, who knows what, but debt to society paid, and yet still somebody else who has their last name can't vote. So, let's talk about the millions who did and the millions who didn't vote. At worst, even if you're right, it's still a wash.
You reminded us of the Hastert rule, but the Trump rule still applies. If he is accusing somebody of something, chances are he's doing it himself.
Yes. Well, that's always been the case.
You are cheating with millions of voters. Actually, you, Mr. Trump, and your party are cheating with millions of voters.
Yes.
But not the way you suggest. It's the other way. You're denying them the right to vote.
That is definitely true. And, of course, in the outright fraud arena, there was, just as a side note, yet another low-level Trump functionary who happens to have made the news with his conviction for election fraud, this dating back to 2012. But it only makes you wonder what was the guy up to during 2016. But yet another one finally hauled before the courts and actually convicted or caught red-handed in election fraud. And gee whiz, it's one of yours.
Well, never mind that Hillary used email.
Yes, that's basically the problem.
All right, well, that's my segment for today. Little of this, little of that. Thanks so much for tolerating me, David. This is Greg Dworkin speaking with my longtime friend, David Waldman, Kagro in the morning. And he and I will get through this post-election period together, and we'll do it with you. And if you don't listen to us, we'll do it without you, but we're going to do it anyway. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll be back tomorrow. We'll do it again.
Okay, thanks very much.
What are you going to talk about on the show next? Do you have any idea?
Yes, well, I'll tell you who is this guy that got convicted, just so you can look that up. It'll be fun. And then from there, who knows?
You can always go back to Mr. Kellogg, but I'm not going there myself.
I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, take care.
That's
Talk
part
to
of
you
my
tomorrow.
problem. Okay, take care. Thanks. That is a great start. It is an unusual start. Now you got me thinking about that again. And I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to get off of that subject again. No pun intended. Holy mackerel. What a story. Breakfast. Unbelievable. I'll hold to my more recent promise, however, and just bring you up to speed on who is the latest person hauled before the courts and convicted of election fraud, a felony election fraud, 10 counts. Well, I'll give you the story. It is, I picked it up here on a link via Twitter taking me to a blog, Politically Speaking, a centrist political commentary blog by a guy by the name of Chad Selwisky. And I don't know Chad. But this puts the usual regular guy sort of spin on it. But there are links to, as with most bloggers, okay, sure, there's some spin, but there's links to actual stories in the mainstream traditional media backing up most of the claims here. Although I will note that it was actually quite difficult to come up with the original reports from the M Live or the Michigan Live website. For whatever reason, there were a lot of 404 errors in trying to get around to their reporting on this guy's background. But for that reason, I initially considered maybe I need to set this aside or just jettison this piece. However, I was able to come up with competing reporting from the more local papers, the Grand Haven, Michigan papers, that confirmed most, if not all, of the things claimed here. But the rest of it sort of it jives with the rest of the reporting here. So I'll go back to this blog entry and let you know who this guy is. Brandon Hall is his name, and I guess if you live in Grand Haven, Michigan, you might recognize the name and go, "Oh my God, that guy again!" And not just because the photo of him with Donald Trump illustrating the piece features him in a what looks to be a red polo type shirt, although maybe it's a lot of buttons. Maybe it's a red button down. He's wearing what appears to be a gray blazer with black trim that I believe he stole from Captain Kangaroo when he was a younger man. Brandon, I mean, because this blazer barely fits him at this stage of the game. He's gained some weight. So maybe like freshman year he stole this thing, and since has graduated from college and, packed on a little weight, as we all tend to do when we go away to school. Anyway, it looks absolutely ridiculous, but that's not the point of the article. Brandon Hall, the controversial West Michigan blogger who served as a key figure in the Donald Trump campaign's organizing efforts across the state, I don't know how key, was found guilty today, that would have been yesterday, of 10 felony counts of election fraud. So what was he up to? Well, I'll give you the whole write-up. In Ottawa County Circuit Court, a jury took less than an hour to find Hall guilty of forging signatures on nominating petitions for a circuit judge candidate who was a Hall political ally. And by the way, Hall appears to be about 12. So how does a guy like that have political allies? He really does. He's actually been active for quite a while. In 2012, Hall, now 27, admitted to signing fake signatures on the petition of Chris, who knows what, Hoteling, H-O-U-G-H, T-A-L-I-N-G, Tailing, Hoteling, yodeling, does it rhyme with yodeling? As they traveled to the state capital of Lansing to beat the candidate filing deadline. So they were trying to file for him to run for judge, and they didn't have enough signatures, so he faked them. That's what he did. Hall used different pens and both hands to make the signatures look distinct. Though he hopes to... It's interesting, too. I mean, I guess maybe to the naked eye that would look distinct. Both hands, certainly, but different pens. Like, well, when you go out to gather signatures for petitions, you usually bring a pen with you. It wouldn't be that unusual for everyone to sign with the same pen. You offer them the petition and the pen. Maybe, every 25 signatures, the pen changes because you move locations. But all right, whatever. So this is an amateurish hack job of a forgery. Fine. Though he hopes to appeal the verdict, Hall now faces up to 5 years in prison when he's sentenced on December 27th. I have a feeling he'll get an ankle bracelet and a trip home, but whatever. While Hall was not a part of the national Trump campaign apparatus, he emerged early in the primary election season as an ardent supporter of the New York billionaire, and later played a key role as a leader in the Trump camp's grassroots efforts in the state. If you're wondering what attracted him to Trump, it becomes clear when they describe this guy's full background. Hall and a group of young GOP activists emerged as the team that would provide fieldwork and organizing efforts. The state communications director for Trump praises Hall's campaign role in a post-election commentary on Facebook. I don't know whether this was for the purpose of swaying the court or what, but he wrote, this person on Facebook, "Beyond just helping me, he wore about 10 different hats," they love hats, "for the campaign and came through for everyone time and time again, even when he knew he would not be receiving the credit because he'd be sentenced to prison." Said Tim Lineberger, I don't know how, does he pronounce the little E in there? Lineberger is what it looks like to me. I'm proud to call Brandon one of my best friends and look forward to seeing what he does next. No doubt it will be huge. Get it? It's unclear if the National Trump Campaign team was aware of Hall's track record of lawbreaking when they put him in a significant campaign position. Now, you might say, of course they wouldn't. He hadn't been convicted of it yet. But when he says track record, he really means track record. According to MLive, that's the Michigan News Consortium's website, Hall in 2008 was elected to the Grand Haven School Board at age 18. That is remarkable. So he really has been involved in politics for a while. But one of those sort of weird stunt candidates you hear about from time to time. And they're very often precocious young Republicans who do this thing. But he then resigned 2 years later. Why? Because he was Donald Trump's kindred spirit. As it turns out, he resigned 2 years later after being convicted of stealing $750 from an American Cancer Society fundraiser. What a dick. I think I can say that on the radio. I mean, what kind of a dick do you have to be? You got to be Donald Trump's kind. Donald Trump, the self-dealer with his fake charity, this guy is just embezzling, stealing $750 from the Cancer Society fundraiser. And, I'll resign. This is at age 20. In 2012, Hall emerged as a candidate for the 89th state House seat. Imagine, I guess this is why I say he's a kindred spirit with Trump, is can you imagine the gumption, we'll say, of this kid, 18 years old, 2 years later, steals $750 from the Cancer Society fundraiser, and then 2 years after that, says, you know what, I'm running for the state legislature. That's what I'm going to do. What? No, you're not. You're a thief. And you steal from cancer charities. I'm going to run anyway. Well, anyhow, he dropped out, as it happens, before the primary election. Why? Attack of conscience? No. Jailed for violating his probation by testing positive for marijuana. What? This guy. He ran unsuccessfully in a comeback in 2014 as a write-in candidate for the school board. And even that didn't work. In 2015, the Michigan Secretary of State ruled that Hall violated campaign finance law during a Grand Haven City Council election by omitting required disclaimers from a postcard mailing. While his election fraud charges relating to the 2012 nominating forgeries were pending, Hall's blog, West Michigan Politics, occasionally posted eyebrow-raising right-wing claims without offering facts. That sounds familiar. Yet Hall brashly mounted a campaign for a state house seat in this year's August GOP primary in Ottawa County, but received just 8% of the vote. Which is, thank God for that, I guess. But this guy just keeps going. And, people are just, I don't know, it's a name. It sounds American. It's on the ballot. What the hell? Let's go for it, right? I guess all he can do is bank on the fact that most people don't give a crap and pay attention to anything, and will just not find out that this guy with a normal sounding name, and he's got a normal looking haircut, and he looks like the kind of douche that would show up and run for this seat. Why don't we just give it to him? Thankfully, I guess enough people will remember it. Anyway, at the fraud trial in Ottawa County, one of Hall's friends, Zachary Savage, testified against him in exchange for immunity for prosecution. Hall did not take the stand, and his attorney offered no defense witnesses. So there you have it. That's the kind of fiduciary douche, I guess, we're talking about, working even at the low levels of the Trump campaign. Just another, run-of-the-mill, routine, low-level Republican voter fraud criminal caught and convicted. So, whatever. Another shorter anecdote circulating on Twitter this morning and making the rounds about Steve Mnuchin, which is the pronunciation I'm going to adopt for all this. Matt McDermott tweeting this one around to the delight of many. I can tell you exactly how many by the time I put it aside. 427, as a matter of fact. Trump's treasury pick. What about him? Mnuchin's One West. That was the bank he owned before selling it to, was it CIT Group? Okay. His One West Bank filed at some point to take a 90-year-old woman's house after a 27-cent payment error. That sounds like a guy you want around at Treasury in particular, overseeing the continuing mortgage fraud drama as it unfolds. As a matter of fact, I've got here the article linked in the Matt McDermott tweet is to Politico. I'll give you the headline. Trump Treasury pick made millions after his bank foreclosed on homeowners. And the subheader is the one about One West foreclosing on the 90-year-old woman after the 27-cent payment error. You know, one of the more outrageous examples, I'm sure. And I could read you the whole piece here, and it would probably be worth your while. Lorraine Wallert on this, and I would read it to you because it sounds like an amazing story, but for the fact that I know hiding elsewhere in my pocket cache here is somewhere a David Dayen piece that touches on, if not the same anecdote, I'm sure many more like it. And this is actually straight from David's own Tumblr blog. I imagine it is being prepared for, actually, maybe it's just collected there. I was going to say, I imagine it'd be being prepared for publication somewhere, but actually the way David's Tumblr blog actually works, it's usually not that he is just entering things there for you to read, but rather he is storing links to things he's already published elsewhere in paying traditional media. And in fact, this is the case here. This piece run by The Nation. David writes for a lot of publications, as many of our favorite writers do. Wilbur Ross, who was mentioned in Greg's Roundup, and Steve Mnuchin, profiteers of the great foreclosure machine, go to Washington. I've focused on Wilbur Ross in his stint as owner of the parent company operating the Sago mine, just to make the point to West Virginia coal miners and those white working class folks, are really more to the point, the champions of the insistence that we turn our attention to the white working class more so than the coal miners themselves. But I think that does puts a hell of a point on it in West Virginia to remind them that, yep, your guy put the owner of the Sago mine in his cabinet. But Wilbur Ross actually made a great deal of his fortune. His real vocation is leveraged buyouts of companies, restructuring them so that he can extract dollars from them. Very much the Bain Capital version of management theory, just buying companies so that you can restructure them, and you restructure them not because you want them to be healthy entities with lots of good, stable, long-term, well-paying jobs in them, but because there are things you can do to manipulate the finances such that cash becomes available, and you can grant yourself that cash because you own enough shares. That's the bottom line of things, and that's where he really made his money. He didn't buy the Sago mine because he loved coal mining or had it in his blood or thought it was vital to the country or just good salt of the earth type work. It was another company that he could extract dollars from, appropriately enough, being an extractive industry. But I mean, it's chock full of once unionized workers who will have fat pensions stored away for them somewhere, because those are the kinds of pensions people who do this work actually deserve, not because it's undeserved, but because he knew that there were those fat pensions were sitting there. He'd buy the company, restructure it in such a way that the fat pensions could be liquidated and sent to Wilbur's bank account. That's why he owned the Sago mine, in case you were ever wondering about that. So if you were wondering what makes a Goldman Sachs guy like Steve Mnuchin similar to the guy who owned the most infamous coal mine in recent West Virginia memory, it's not because one's a coal miner and one's a financier. It's because they're both financiers. The financier who owned the Sago mine didn't care one way or the other about mining or know a goddamn thing about it, which is probably why people died in finding ways to restructure things such that more cash would be available. One of the things, in addition to pension funds, would be, man, you guys are spending a lot of money on safety measures to make sure that these miners don't die, but they're really just garbage people. Why don't you kill them and give me the money we're spending on safety features instead? And they did, and Wilbur got that money, and those miners did die, and everybody swore that they would do something about it. And then Wilbur left, and the miners are still dead. And then they voted for Wilbur, or Wilbur's boss anyway. So that's just one of the tragedies of something, la la la. Anyway, you poor dear people. Something. I don't know what to tell you. Mnuchin and Ross, though, both led companies that committed fraud to foreclose on millions of homeowners. That's where the bulk of the money came from. Now they'll be in charge of the entire U.S. economy. What could go wrong? Asks David. Let's let him tell us. But first, a reminder to those of you at home who might be sitting in the same position that I'm in here. The Nation is reminding me I've read 3 of 6 free articles from them, and that I ought to pay them some money to continue with their fantastic coverage. Although, this is interesting. Now I can't, can I even get rid of this message? It's one of 10,000 places to which I guess I ought to be subscribing and can't. But then again, maybe I'll make some selective subscriptions out of the generous treatment that many of you have granted to the show, and I'll just call that an expense of doing the show, and we'll do things that way. But hey, we deserve support, they deserve support. Spread it around a little bit, and if you haven't yet, I guess I'll do some of that on your behalf and subscribe to some of these places that are habitual reads for us. Okay. It's really not going to let me read this thing, no matter what. That's really pretty wild. How do I get around this thing? I've read 3 of my 6, and okay, so how about letting me read this one? I guess they're not going to let me do that. That's interesting. And I can't even read it in Pocket View either. Well, they do a good job anyway at blogging those things for us, or at keeping their firewall up. A lot of places that purport to be keeping their stories behind firewalls don't have anything that allows you to prevent Pocket from giving you the Pocket view of things. Sometimes it's a little bit warped and distorted in the layout, but you still get to read the thing. And that's rotten cheating, and you probably shouldn't do it. All I had to do was give them my email address, though, so I'm happy to do that to get the rest of this article out. Here we go. But they're going to pop up on me again anyway. Here we go. In my book, Chain of Title, you remember that David's book is entitled Chain of Title. That's title in the title. You should buy it for that reason alone. If you haven't read it, you should. If you haven't read it, that means you haven't bought it. If you haven't bought it, buy it and don't read it. I don't care. I mean, I'll read it to you in bits and pieces and stories like this. In my book, Chain of Title, David writes, I refer to the collection of lenders, mortgage servicing companies, third-party document processors, foreclosure mill law firms, and trustee banks as all part of the great foreclosure machine. I'm now realizing I should have trademarked the phrase, probably true, because Donald Trump just picked 2 engineers of that machine to serve in his cabinet. You better hurry, because Donald Trump might trademark that phrase himself out of pride in his use of the great foreclosure machine. And by the way, he'll have an enormous advantage over you. I understand that in the days following the election, his companies did scramble to register some new trademarks for his properties around the world. I think it was the American Idea. I don't really know exactly whether or not you can trademark something as, as open and bland and as all that, but I suspect he'll have an easier time of it as President of the United States and boss of the Patent and Trademarks Office. But whatever. He's going to beat you to that trademark unless you move quickly, Dave. Anyway, yes, I said 2 of the engineers of that machine. Most in liberal circles and on Capitol Hill are buzzing about Steve Mnuchin, chosen as Treasury Secretary, and that's with good reason. He is, in fact, despicable, the Forrest Gump of the financial crisis, as Elizabeth Warren put it. I did see that, ever present for every assault on homeowners. People keep bringing up Mnuchin's 17 years at Goldman Sachs, following in the footsteps of his dad, also a partner there, but that may be the least distressing part of his resume, depending on what you thought of Suicide Squad. I did a comprehensive profile of Mnuchin 6 months ago, before it was cool, when Trump tapped him as a national finance chair of his campaign. And the picture that emerges is that of a profiteer. Perfect for Trump, of course. In an unusual deal with the FDIC, Mnuchin led an investment team that bought the predatory lender IndyMac, saddled with tens of thousands of failing mortgages, for $1.65 billion. The FDIC has a standard deal for buyers of crisis-era banks. They would cover all losses above the first 20% on loan defaults. Mnuchin, who became CEO of the lender, treated this as a money printing machine. His bank, renamed OneWest, could foreclose on homeowners, harvest fees for appraisals and inspections and late payments, and get protected by a federal backstop. The FDIC lost $13 billion on IndyMac. Mnuchin and his company made $3 billion in profits, most of that coming directly from the FDIC in loss-sharing costs. Doesn't sound like much of a loss share at all. Sounds like a straight-up transfer of wealth. But okay, whatever. What that meant for homeowners was they were rubble to be plowed so Mnuchin could profit. Borrowers got few options to modify loans as OneWest dashed to foreclosure. The bank pursued all of the tricks of the era. Servicer-driven defaults, that is where servicing companies tell homeowners they should, and they must, miss payments in order to get help, and then when they do, they move to foreclose on them. You know about that trick. We've probably discussed it in the past. If you don't, read that book, Chain of Title. I mean, it's as plain as the nose on, I guess, any face. Well, any face with a nose, anyway. Look, I'm trying to be inclusive here. So they used that old trick. Dual tracking, that would be when servicers negotiate modifications and pursue foreclosure at the same time, and more. Activists ended up on this guy's lawn demanding that foreclosures stop. So, of the few places where activists actually showed up and made a stink in public, going to the homes of the owners of these foreclosure mills and the banks employing them, this is one of the places they ended up. Steve Mnuchin's lawn. And now that guy is elevated after this election and during this election. Wow. There was a decided racial component as well. 68% of OneWest's 36,000 plus foreclosures in California were in non-white areas. Just 2 weeks ago, fair housing advocates accused OneWest of racial discrimination in lending and where it closed bank branches. OneWest was also a market leader in foreclosing on the elderly. That's a place you want to be a market leader, right? Its subsidiary, Financial Freedom, what a great name, has carried out a disproportionate number of reverse mortgage foreclosures, which target seniors to suck out their home equity, another extractive industry. It's not hyperbole to say that every one of the foreclosures were fraudulent. I find it amusing that media outlets like Bloomberg describe this claim as a mortgage meltdown controversy and not as a fact. But we have the information. The infamous July 2009 deposition of OneWest Vice President Erica Johnson Seck is still online, and it's linked here. You can see it for yourself. Johnson Seck signed 750 mortgage documents a week in the name of at least 7 different financial institutions. These were sworn affidavits where Johnson Seck claimed under penalty of perjury that she reviewed all the relevant information in a mortgage file, material facts that could lead to someone's losing their home. She was asked how long she spent executing each document. I have changed my signature considerably, Johnson Seck said. It's just an E now, so no more than 30 seconds. She also admitted to not reading the documents before signing them, which at 30 seconds a clip was understandable. She didn't know how any of the records were generated or who computed them. She didn't even sign in the presence of a notary, undermining the entire purpose of having a notarized document, which these were, of course. And, by the way, these fraudulent affidavits and other fake documents covered up the underlying crime. Indy Mac didn't properly receive promissory notes or mortgages and were foreclosing without standing. And an enormously complex story, but all well explained in his book. But I'll pause to point out that even if you were 100% correct and a speed reader, signing a notarized document outside of the presence of a notary is a problem all by itself. You're already in perjury territory. Done. Forget what the documents say and whether or not you read them. But it also happens to be a problem because you're notarizing a document that swears that you read them, so you got two problems. On top of which, what's usually in them, if you did read them, is evidence of fraud all by itself. Anyway, the fourth and most important layer of all this is the documents themselves were generated without, in many cases, any basis in reality whatsoever. They just simply said, here's a document that says you own this mortgage and you're foreclosing on it because this person didn't pay. Now, you need to sign this notarized document swearing that you reviewed this material and found it to be correct. But, one, it's not correct. Two, the people who generated it have no knowledge of this particular mortgage. It doesn't matter. They're only a bunch of people who were paid to generate documents. Three, they didn't even bother to look and find out whether or not the person who hired them to generate paperwork that stated that they owned the mortgage and could foreclose on it actually did own the mortgage and foreclose on it. And P.S., that paperwork never existed in the first place, and you couldn't have researched it even if you wanted to. But the point is, I'm paying you to generate this paperwork, so just do it. So they do, and then you don't review it, sign a paper that says you did review it, and don't have a notary present to notarize it and yet turn it in as a notarized document. There's like 5 different crimes in any one of these things, and she's doing them every 30 seconds, 750 times a week. By the way, I don't believe that person is in jail. I believe they are, in fact, instead very rich and living happily ever after. Even richer and living even more happily ever after is her boss, Steve Mnuchin, going to be the Treasury Secretary. Who cares what the signature says, right? Now, his signature, by the way, is going on every one of your pieces of legal tender that you might still have in your wallet come, say, 2018 or so. So no problem there, right? Full faith and credit is all well warranted, etc. Well, it's mandated anyway. It doesn't really make a difference. Okay, so this fraud upon the court, David continues, done 750 times a week on eventually 36,000 plus loans. Mnuchin's One West was completely not unique in this regard. Millions of homeowners were thrown out of their homes based on false documents, a phenomenon that continues to this very day, mostly because courts can't bring themselves to believe that such an astounding fraud could ever be perpetrated by anyone. So none of this could possibly be fraud, because if it was, we've been wasting our time for decades, and everything we've decided and everything we've known is backwards and upside down. In other words, we've been living in fact-free, post-fact society in civil litigation over mortgages for decades, and that can't possibly be right, because then everything would be, oh my God, and right, and so it just continues, and that's what you'll learn when you read the book, and then of course you'll give up all hope on anybody ever being prosecuted for anything, because why bother? Okay, sorry to depress you. Anyway, it does continue to this very day, as he notes, and Mnuchin himself profited, eventually selling One West to CIT, a company he will regulate at Treasury, by the way. He's currently still sitting on the CIT board. He sold them for double what he paid for them in the first place. Remember, he paid, what was it, $1.65 million? The sale went for $3.2 billion. Oh, I'm sorry. The 3.2 is actually something entirely different. But yeah, that was about the sale price of One West when he finally turned it over to CIT. But David instead is referring to some other number here. Next, I could go on with Mnuchin, the $3.2 million in fake Bernie Madoff profits he refused to return. The quiet withdrawal of $50 million at Relativity Media just before it filed bankruptcy. But he'll soon have a partner in the cabinet with whom to go over all these schemes, Commerce Secretary nominee Wilbur Ross. Let's learn a little bit about him. Ross is an old-school Wall Streeter, someone tied up in their secret societies and rituals. Oh, wow. A skull and bone-ish thing there, too. What is an old-school Wall Streeter at this stage? Are we talking about like old-school 80s Wall Streeter or old-school 60s? Well, I imagine 80s. It's the idea. Anyway, he's a private equity baron who scoops up failing companies, much like Mnuchin did with IndyMac, squeezes every last nickel out of them by firing workers and shipping business lines offshore, and manages to profit in the exchange, usually by navigating the companies through bankruptcy. His firm was in charge of the Sago mine in West Virginia when it blew up, killing 12 workers. Yay. The mine had a history of safety problems. He moved Cone Mills overseas in another of his ventures, eliminating about 75% of its U.S. jobs. He invested in the Greek banking system, that was a good buy, and encouraged the fire sale of the country's assets, because what does he care? He's not Greek. But Ross is tied up in the great foreclosure machine as well. One of the companies he pulled out of bankruptcy in August 2007, and isn't that a good thing, pulling a company out of bankruptcy, was American Home Mortgage Servicing, Inc., or AHMSI. Ross bought out the servicing rights, the rights to manage day-to-day operations and determine whether to modify or foreclose mortgages, on about $132 billion in loans. They were the second largest servicer of subprime loans in America. Lynn Sismoniak, a whistleblower who fought AHMSI in court and who won a $95 million case against several servicers on behalf of the federal government in 2012, explains that Ross's company outsourced its mortgage document operations. They used a company called DocX, which forged millions of mortgage assignments claiming to be the officers of dozens of different banks. These documents were fraudulently signed after the fact to recreate a chain of title that lenders broke. They were a document cleanup shop. Lorraine Brown, the CEO of DocX, went to prison, somebody finally did, for 5 years for this activity, making her the only person to be jailed for foreclosure fraud. She did it all by herself. Nobody helped. After entrusting its mortgage operations to fraudsters, AHMSI eventually changed its name to Homeward Residential and got bought out by Ocwen, O-C-W-E-N. Wilbur Ross stayed involved in Ocwen, that happens pretty frequently in these buyouts, serving on the board of directors. If anything, Ocwen was worse than AHMSI. It routinely broke the law with systematic misconduct at every stage of the mortgage process, according to Consumer Financial Protection Bureau Director Richard Cordray. In 2013, CFPB fined Ocwen $2.1 billion for, among other things, charging borrowers unauthorized fees, failing to apply borrower payments to loans, failing to maintain accurate accounting statements, imposing insurance policies on borrowers who already had them, deceiving borrowers about loan modifications, and robo-signing foreclosure documents in fraud upon state courts. That last one, of course, being the very crime I just spent 5 minutes describing to you. But did you catch all of those in a way, by the way? The CFPB fines Ocwen $2 billion for, as it says, among other things, charging borrowers unauthorized fees. That's pretty clear. Failing to apply borrower payments to loans. I mean, is that not clear from the I just feel like we need to stop and emphasize that. You take a loan from a lender, and they say you got to pay $100 a month. So month one comes, they send you the little coupon book maybe. You tear out coupon number one, you put a $100 check in there with the coupon and mail it to them. They get it, they cash it, they have your $100, but they don't put in the books anywhere, paid January 2016, $100, first installment. And then they just send you a notice that says you're in default on your loan. And you say, no, I'm not. I have the canceled check that I paid you. And they say, well, it's not in our books, so not only do you owe me the February $100, but you owe me $110 for January. But I have the canceled check. Well, I don't know what to tell you. Our system, blah, blah, blah. And you argue and argue and argue with them, and February passes, even though you've paid them again. Now you've sent them $200. It's March 1st, and they say, you owe us $330. $100 for March, $340. $100 for March, $110 for February, which you didn't pay, though you did, and now $120 for January, which you still didn't pay. And you're just tearing your hair out, and you're fighting with them, and you're sending them copies of the canceled checks, and they're just tossing them in the garbage and saying, I don't know what to tell you. Now you owe us even more money. This is what was going on. And it's total BS, obviously, so CFPB fines them $2 billion. What's the upshot of this? The guy is going to be Secretary of Commerce, and the guy who was his partner in similar crimes is going to be the Secretary of Treasury, and the cabinet members are going to say, you know what, I'm tired of seeing dumb little piddling things like this be considered illegal. It's just innovative business practice. Just don't make entries into the books, and then when people say this is ridiculous, you say, yeah, it is, and then continue to build them. That's how you get to be a billionaire. I don't understand why this should be illegal. And after all, it's dumb that it's even on the books because they caught me red-handed doing it, and I didn't go to jail, so how illegal is it really? Well, they fined you $2 billion. Yeah, big deal. Fine the company $2 billion. So out of the $300 billion in the company coffers, I give them $2 billion. Big deal. How illegal is it? Now it's not going to be illegal at all, I guess. And by the way, I mean, you might say, well, now that they're serving in government, I guess there's this. They won't be profiting from it directly, personally, if they sweep away the laws that would even fine their companies, much less put them in jail because they're working in the government now. Some other person who they're probably friendly with will be the beneficiary of it, but that's disgusting enough. But no, that assumes that they're not simply going to adopt Donald Trump's position on divestiture from their business interests while they serve in government. And why should they? He's not. Is he going to force them to? I don't know. He might. I mean, he might be that kind of guy. I'm the one who's going to become the first trillionaire, not the rest of you. You all have to divest, and I don't. I'm going to make it to $1 trillion before I die. Who knows what his goal is. But bad enough that this gets to continue. There are, of course, other variants of the same crimes listed here under the umbrella of this $2 billion fine. Moving on, though, one of David's favorite Aquin stories is the backdating scandal. Under the law, servicers must inform borrowers of why they were denied a loan modification and then give them 30 days to appeal. So you're headed into foreclosure and you say, listen, let's make a loan modification instead of me having to pay you $1,000 a month for, whatever, for the next 100 months, let's say, just to make things easy. How about if we make it $500 a month for the next 200 months? That could be one modification. Or let's write down some of the principal and say it's $1,000, but only for 50 months or something like that. Anyway, you want to work something like that out, you make a proposal to your lender, and if they say no, you've got 30 days to appeal that decision. Aquin sent thousands of letters like that, denying people the appeals, backdated 30 days from the sending. In other words, purporting to give borrowers no time to act at all. You got to give people 30 days to appeal this. That's not a big deal because you just reject it again a second time and people tear their hair out and there's really not much they can do after that. But I'm annoyed that we even have to deal with their second complaint. So here's the deal. If they write you on February 1st that says, I need a loan modification, on March 1st, send them a letter, or on March 2nd, send them a letter dated February 2nd denying their request for a loan modification. And then they say, I get this letter in my mailbox, let's say the next day, March 3rd. This arrives in my mailbox, and I say, well, I know I'm entitled to 30 days to appeal. You appeal, and you say, nah, the 30 days actually just expired. We mailed this notice to you on February 2nd. No, you didn't. How could that be? I just got it on March 3rd. It doesn't take a month to reach me. Well, look at the date on the letter. Did you throw out the envelope with the date? Oh, yeah. Dang, well, that's the date. 30 days, you missed it. That's some trick. Why don't we put that guy in government? We got to run the government like a business, man. What a great idea. These were the businesses they had in mind, by the way, when they said that we should be running the government like a business. Ross eventually stepped down from the Ocwen board and miraculously was able to sell $72 million in stock right before it dropped 20% in price. I guess because they were going to be fined. Ross and Mnuchin were profiteers in a crisis that bore nearly all its misery on the backs of, or I guess all the misery was borne on the backs of working people who suffered from the misfortune of acquiring a bad loan at the wrong time. You know, white working class. But there's a supreme irony here. The foreclosure crisis that these two moguls and Trump himself used as a money-making scheme may have handed Trump the election. That is quite an irony, isn't it? The Center for American Progress just released a study looking at the role of Midwestern housing instability in the 2016 election. I guess there's something that David finds the Center for American Progress useful for after all. They found that between 2012 and 2016, negative equity rates, people who are underwater, where a homeowner owes more on their house than it's actually worth, got worse in counties in the Midwest that had shifted this time from blue to red. The Democratic vote was similarly lower in urban counties where housing conditions eroded. In other words, Barack Obama's handling of the mortgage crisis by protecting bank balance sheets instead of homeowner balance sheets may have cost Hillary Clinton the election. That is another way of looking at it. That is true. This was the biggest mistake of the Obama presidency, David concludes, instituting a foreclosure mitigation program that servicers used as a predatory lending scheme and then failing to take advantage of the extreme legal exposure of the industry after the revelations of foreclosure fraud. They really did put their heads on a platter and ask for it. And they were given a pass instead. And in a sad twist, the very people who will benefit from that failure and Trump's election are the ones who profited from foreclosures the entire time. It's enough to make you say that I want to go off the air early, and I'll come back and complain to you tomorrow about something else. Isn't that amazing? You can always count on David Dayen to have that clear-eyed view to cut through and get to the real point of the outrage of the cabinet that Donald Trump is putting together. And remember, of course, that Donald Trump made a couple of comments during the campaign about how he was rooting for a housing crisis because he was going to be able to make big bucks on it. He didn't, actually. I mean, compared to these guys, he didn't, I don't think, do all that well. He never really followed through. He's not a super savvy investor. I mean, I think we learned that much about Donald Trump. And I guess to the extent that people were hoping that he would surround himself with smart people, Wilbur Ross and Mnuchin are smarter than he is. There is that. They're just they're more devious in devising ways to extract cash from dying industries, not only dying industries, but dying industries that are like committing suicide, begging to be executed by the state. But the state refuses to do it because, well, we're merciful and benevolent. Damn. Oh, well. Well, that's an interesting way to lay it at Obama's feet. And there's certainly some truth to that, although I'm not a big fan of bashing Obama for losing this election necessarily, but it's got to be considered a part of the puzzle. I think that's only fair. Don't worry about it. Obama's not insulted. He's not going to suffer for it. Even if he hears what David had to say or is listening to the show now, I think he'll retire happily, and that's because, on balance, many other things happened. Okay, let's see. Other directions to go in here. Oh, yeah, you know what? Here's another thing. Maybe we'll make it all about Mnuchin for the moment. Politico came up with this interesting piece, and I believe that it was retweeted and brought to my attention by my having followed David Farenthold. So appropriately enough, Mnuchin Foundation, he has a foundation. Of course. Why not, right? Well, he's got a charitable foundation. We'll, I guess, find out a little bit about how he built it and how he populated its bank account in a little bit. But what's more important here are the expenditures. Mnuchin Foundation donated to groups that vouched for his bank. How do you like that? Oh, by the way, side note, I'll make a note to myself about this one so that I can include something with you. But as I was reading the story of the foundation and talking about how he populated the accounts, I wanted to make note of the opening comments of yesterday's show, wherein I mentioned that we ought to be on the lookout, perhaps just speculatively speaking, for the possibility that Donald Trump would take a personal and immediate cash profit from his inaugural activities in the form of either appearance fees or management fees or something like it. And it was speculation, and it was objected to, as I mentioned to you. I read a tweet on the air objecting to this speculation, and I was trying to explain why I thought perhaps this speculation was more warranted with respect to Donald Trump than perhaps anyone else. Though I'm not sure I've convinced myself. I mean, I think that our objector yesterday had a good point in that this is the sort of speculation, if it were leveled at any other politician, I might agree, or if it was leveled by Donald Trump against another politician, I would say that's an assertion being made without evidence. And there's clearly a point to that. That's clearly something that we don't like when he does it. And how is it that I find myself accepting it about him? And I guess the answer is I'm not sure we're without evidence with respect to Trump. There's not evidence at this point with respect to the specific speculation that he might be attempting to take some personal profit from the inaugural fundraising. However, we do have an actual track record of his self-dealing, now admitted through his foundation, and a number of other instances from his past in which, I mean, he operates as, in his celebrity private life, that is to say, the private business of his being a celebrity, he very often would take appearance fees for things and sometimes funnel them to the Trump Foundation if they were small potatoes. But that's kind of the basis on which he operated. If he was going to be prevailed upon to do something that he wasn't going to do of his own volition in the first place anyway, and sometimes even if he was doing that, he would seek an appearance fee or some kind of personal profit from it. Of course, you could argue that something similar was going on with Hillary Clinton agreeing to speak to Goldman Sachs. Remember them? They're evil people. Remember, we were just upset about them. But taking appearance fees essentially to come and make a speech. And, I don't think anybody really thought that $400,000 is, for an hour's speech is really a serious rate at which you would remunerate even a very, an exceptionally good motivational speaker. We all kind of know what that was about, although she did bring some considerable and unique insight, being, former first lady and a senator and about to run for president again. But yeah, I think we all know what underlies all of that. Trump certainly takes advantage of the same system wherever he can, and I don't think it's out of keeping with his past behavior, nor is it out of keeping with the way he ran his foundation, nor is it out of keeping with the way he announces now going forward he intends to conduct his business, even as he moves into the official role of the president. So I think it's perhaps a stronger claim against him than anybody else, but okay, maybe we're jumping the gun. So he questioned, how can we find this out? When will we know the facts about how the inaugural committee spent its cash? And remember, they are going back to the old application of the law. The law still says corporate donations of any size, there's no cap of any kind on donations to an inaugural committee, and it can be corporate. It was voluntary that the incoming Obama administration decided to forego the acceptance of any corporate donations to its inaugural committee. So the state of the law remains the same. You can do this. There's nothing illegal about it. That's true. So what do we know? What kind of disclosure is there? And this is sort of like the Mitch McConnell dream situation in terms of campaign finance. The FEC does in fact monitor what goes on at the inaugural committees, and inaugural committees are required to file disclosures of who is donating and how much. So that, like I said, is the ultimate dream manifests itself in the form of only for presidential inaugural committees only, but we can sort of test theories there. Mitch McConnell always said there should be unlimited donations from unlimited sources, but full disclosure. So there is that. And when I say it's the Mitch McConnell dream, it really is the Mitch McConnell dream, because although there is a requirement for an inaugural committee, you take a look at the FEC website for this, to disclose all of its contributions, over the $200 threshold, which is, as usual, was the case for presidential campaigns as well. Technically speaking, they were not liable for listing the donations that came in under $200. So if you gave them $50 in cash, they could just stick that in their pocket and not talk about it. That technically is true, but most campaigns, I don't know how the Trump campaign ran, but if you gave money to the Clinton campaign or the Obama campaign before that, if you gave them $50, cash, check, what have you, or even in exchange for a hat, they made you fill out the form. They just, in an abundance of caution, filled out everything they could and reported every donation that they could, and that's great. You don't have to. Likewise, you don't have to with the inaugural committee, but there's no caps and no limitations on where the money can come from, except foreign money. That's true. They still do ban that. But more important than that, the FEC, of course, requires that campaigns disclose donations coming in and that they disclose and detail disbursements, the expenditures of the campaign, who's getting that money, what happens to it. Did you know that inaugural committees don't have to file that? There isn't even a form for it. There's a form for what money comes in and who gave it to you. There is no form for what happened to the money and who got it in the end. And the answer is you're all getting it in the end. Ba-dum-bum. That's the case. I guess the assumption always was, well, we know what's happening to inaugural money. It's being spent on parties and parades and, security perhaps to some extent, but, freebie hotel rooms for important donors or whatever. It's garbage expenditures and it's slush to be sure. But, who cares? The whole point of it is it's going to be a big party and it's a waste of money, but it's your prerogative to raise and waste that money if you want to. We don't care where it goes. It's going to pay vendors to put on a big bash for you. But we've never had anybody like Donald Trump before. What if What if he really knows this? What if they decide, even if it's small potatoes, look, we raised $100 million for your inauguration. Trump says, I want $1 million appearance fee for my family. Okay, $1 million out of $100 million. That's great. No, I mean $1 million for me, $1 million for Melania, $1 million for Barron, $1 million for Tiffany, $1 million for Ivanka, $1 million for Don, $1 million for Eric. And if we have any pets or anything, or, maybe $1 million for my racist butler, whoever, whatever. Okay, well, even that is small potatoes. Let's say that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for the kids, 6, 7 for the two of you. $7 million out of $100 million we can do. But won't people get suspicious when they see on our disclosure forms that we just paid appearance fees to you? They'll be furious. Maybe they will be, maybe they won't be. I mean, a lot of people will excuse it. Oh, this is how I do things. This is my lifestyle. This is how I make my money. Yeah. Run government like a business. Woo! Other people would be upset. But what if we didn't have to disclose it at all? Well, then in that case, I want a $2 million appearance fee. At least for myself, if not for everybody else. But what the hell? How about 2 for everybody and 4 for me? 1 for you, 1 for me. 1, 2 for me, 2 for you. 3 for you, 1, 2, 3 for me. You remember the old Bugs Bunny thing. We won't find out. There won't be noticed. They won't tell us. They don't have to. You'll never find out. People who are spending $1 million to buy a ticket to a candlelit dinner with Trump, right? We saw that advertised yesterday. Who gets the $1 million? The answer is you'll never know. And he doesn't have to tell you. It might be going in his pocket for all we know. It might be going to the RNC. Could be going to cover costs. I don't know. You don't know. FEC won't know. FEC don't want to know. That, I think, is the most amazing story of the inaugural transition period. But that'll be over soon and everybody will forget about it. So I guess nobody ever paid attention to it. Nobody ever thought that the president would ask for that cash before. But now you can stuff it right into your pockets. This is the guy you ought to be looking at that for. But hey, don't listen to me. Let's talk about Steve Mnuchin and his foundation, which is how we started on this thing. I thought that was the more amazing news, but similarly amazing, at least to David Farenthold, who's had all the amazement that he can handle with Donald Trump. He thought this was an amazing story too. Mnuchin Foundation donated to groups that vouched for his bank. Trump's treasury pick earned millions of dollars from the sale of a bank accused of wrongful foreclosures. We know now how deep those schemes went, thanks to David Dayen. Now, thanks to Isaac Arnsdorf and Kenneth Vogel, we have a little bit more to the story. Donald Trump's choice for Treasury Secretary, Steve Mnuchin, earned tens of millions of dollars from a 2015 bank sale that got a boost from an array of nonprofit groups that had one thing in common. They had received tens of thousands of dollars each from the bank's foundation, which was run by Mnuchin. Take a look at this. The sale of One West, a bank that Mnuchin co-founded and chaired, to CIT Group, remember we learned about that one, for $3.4 billion, now we have the number, drew significant opposition from public interest groups because One West had been accused of wrongful foreclosures and racial discrimination in its mortgage and small business loans. All the stuff David told us about. But instead of they opposed that sale, but it went through anyway. Why? Partly because a parade of community-based nonprofits stepped forward to testify to the federal regulators, who will now be working under Mnuchin, considering the merger, about the good corporate citizenship of One West. All of the groups, ranging from a pair of local boys and girls clubs to a pair of junior achievement clubs, that's not really much of a range, okay, they were beneficiaries of grants from the bank's charitable arm, the One West Foundation, which Mnuchin chaired, according to a Politico review of filings with the Internal Revenue Service and the Federal Reserve. In all, 14 groups that sent letters to the Fed in support of the merger received a total of a combined $2.5 million from the One West Foundation in the 4 years leading up to the merger. In their letters, the groups lauded One West's support for community groups. In 7 of the letters, the groups acknowledged the dollar amounts they received from Mnuchin's charity arm. In the other 7, they referenced only having enjoyed the support of the bank. But at least 2 of the nonprofits acknowledged to Politico that it was explicitly asked by One West to write a supportive letter. In addition, when the Fed convened public panels to debate whether the merger should be approved, representatives of 8 of the nonprofits that received foundation money are listed as having spoken in its favor. That support paid off. The Federal Reserve cited the testimony about the bank's charitable contributions and community service in its decision to approve the merger, which led to Mnuchin reportedly receiving, personally, a $10.9 million payout when he left CIT in March. He still owns an estimated $97 million worth of CIT stock, which he can sell tax-free if he becomes Treasury Secretary. Isn't that nice? So basically they're outlining a very similar form of self-dealing here. Of course, this time he takes corporate money, One West money, puts it in a foundation that he controls, uses it to donate to local charitable groups and community groups, which is a great thing to do, of course, then leans on them to help him get over the threshold of the merger hearings when he's poised to sell off One West and get this huge windfall, which I guess in the end, when he finally becomes Treasury Secretary, will be $100 million additional dollars for him. $10.9 million payout when he left CIT in March, still owns $97 million worth of stock. So over that, $107.9 million for giving away $2.5 million of other people's money in exchange for that's a good deal. And after the merger, 7 of the groups, by the way, that supported it received an additional $3.45 million from the foundation. And why not? It's, at that point, other people's money still. The role of the One West Foundation beneficiaries in advocating the sale could become an issue for Mnuchin during his confirmation process. The relationship opens Mnuchin to allegations that charitable funds he controlled were used to boost his business, a dynamic that could raise concerns about the same prohibition on self-dealing that Trump's own foundation recently admitted to violating. That's why it was so interesting to David Fahrenthold. This is exactly what appeared to happen with the Trump Foundation, said Rosemary Fay, remember her? The lawyer with Adler and Colvin in San Francisco, who we've heard quoted before, who advises nonprofit organizations. It is not an appropriate use of charitable assets to benefit an affiliated business. Trump came under fire when it was revealed that his foundation had used charitable funds to settle his business's legal disputes and buy a portrait of Trump, several of them, in fact, though it's unclear if that's the violation the foundation acknowledged in IRS filings made public last week. Mnuchin and representatives from Trump's transition team did not respond to messages seeking comment. Neither did representatives for One West or former officers of the One West Foundation, which ceased operating not long after the merger. The foundation formed in December 2009 with $10 million donated by One West Bank, according to tax filings. Write-off for them, of course. As a private foundation, it didn't solicit donations and only gave to other charities. It contributed to 29 charities, primarily in and around Los Angeles, ranging from the UCLA Foundation to LA Neighborhood Housing Services, IRS records show. And to that point, it is straight up corporate charity, which we all are supposed to applaud, right? A company, One West, it's rolling in money. It says, let's take $10 million of our dollars and give it out to community groups. Good, great, fantastic, fine. It's what you're supposed to do. It's what we want you to do. And for all intents and purposes, it looks like you're doing exactly what we asked. As it happens, a majority of the funds, $6 million, went to groups that supported the merger. I guess you could argue, well, $4 million, well, I don't know. Maybe they didn't give out the other $4 million. I don't know. Anyway, but you can see where Mnuchin and maybe even a lot of regular people might not think there's anything wrong with this. And it takes some persuading to get them to see the self-dealing angle of it. Look, you gave away money to charity. That's a good thing. We wanted you to do that. Yes, and I agree to that point. And look, you know you're buying goodwill. I mean, that's the explicit purpose of it. Everybody says, okay, you know, you're buying goodwill in the community with those dollars. But at least the dollars go to community groups that are doing good things with the money, and I can't argue with that. And you're allowed to buy yourself some goodwill. And if you're allowed to buy yourself some goodwill, well, what good is it if the goodwill can't benefit you? It's only supposed to be in the abstract? The answer is yes. I mean, it's really only supposed to be in the abstract. If you give money to the Boys and Girls Clubs locally, and they list you in their programs or put your name on a banner at an event, and the people who go there with their kids say, look at that. Look at the local businesses or even regional or national businesses that give money. Look, Coca-Cola did it. We should buy some Coca-Cola. People are doing it now with Kellogg's, right? Kellogg's put the screws to Breitbart. Buy Kellogg. Or vice versa, whatever it is, right? Chick-fil-A hates gay people. Let's eat Chick-fil-A, say the Breitbart readers. Whatever. That's the kind of goodwill you consciously are trying to buy and that the law contemplates and allows. Where it becomes weird is for them to then explicitly go and say, listen, we scratched your back. You scratch ours. It's not going to cost you any money. You still get the $1 million. You get the benefit of us giving you $1 million. All you have to do is write a letter. And maybe one afternoon come to a regulatory hearing where people are taking testimony and say, we gave you $1 million and kids did great things with it. I mean, we're supposed to be entitled to the boost to our reputation from this. Yes. What you're not supposed to be entitled to is then leaning on those people or well, I guess that's really it, is the leaning on them. But suppose some of them just say, we like you because you gave us $1 million. Or wink, wink, we like you because we understand that you don't have to lean on us. We know. Or you send out a letter and say, well, just wanted to let you know we've been an annual supporter of yours, but we're now selling the bank to CIT Group. I hope that the CIT Group will continue its relationship with your Boys and Girls Clubs. But, of course, I won't be in control there. I may sit on the board there, but I won't be the CEO. But just wanted to give you a heads up. And fact is that our merger is being reviewed right now by the Federal Reserve Board. Just wanted to let you know. And if they're savvy groups, they say, oh, what they're looking for is a support letter here. But there might be a wink, wink. Or maybe you keep it out of the letter, but then you call the guy later on and say, just wanted to let you know, I hope you got my letter. Yeah, I did get it. If this merger goes through, I'll be on the board of the bigger corporation. They might be able to give even more money to you later on, But, of course, that would only be if the merger goes through, and the merger will only go through because we had some problems. We stole a lot of money from a lot of people, and the regulators hate us, and they're fining us $2 billion. But if you guys would say, but some of that stolen money went to us, and we did great things with it, maybe that would help. And then we'd be a bigger corporation, and we could give you $2 million. Oh, I get it. Yeah. But that, of course, isn't the only thing that's going on here. In addition to it being manipulative and weird, it also means millions of dollars are personally going to go into my pocket. When this merger goes through, I'm going to make a bundle. That's why I want you to write this letter to people. Ah, okay. So now you're steering company money to people who will scratch your back in ways that are necessary for you to make this merger happen so you make $100 million, $110 million, $107 million. That is self-dealing. Yeah, it is. You caught me. Would you like the $2 million contribution from CIT, though? Yeah, we really would. So there you go. According to tax returns filed this year, the article continues, the foundation was liquidated at the end of last year, and all assets were distributed to qualified charitable organizations and or were related to operating and administrative expenses, as reported on the tax return. A $1 million management fee to Steve. Cedars-Sinai, a nonprofit hospital in Los Angeles, received $301,000 from the One West Foundation before the merger, and they were asked by One West Bank to send a letter describing its philanthropic contributions to Cedars-Sinai, which we were pleased to do, said a spokesman. But the spokesman, who requested not to be named, for whatever reason, because he was so pleased by it, said the request that Cedars-Sinai send a letter was not in any way a condition for a donation from Cedars-Sinai received from One West Bank. He knew enough to say that. The other nonprofit groups that received grants and advocated for the merger didn't respond to requests for comment. How do they do it? But the groups were effusive in their praise of the bank in their letters to the Fed. And there's some samplings from them, a couple of them there, from Junior Achievement and from City Year of Los Angeles, whatever that may be. Boys and Girls Clubs in Santa Monica. Lots of tremendous praise from them. Companies commonly do, of course, use philanthropy to advance their interests, but they're not allowed to demand favors in exchange for the donations, according to Will Brown, a professor and director of the nonprofit management program at the Bush School of Government and Public Service in Texas A&M University. Jordan Leibowitz, a spokesman for Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, you know them, said this raises serious questions about the use of the bank's foundation's money. Were they being used solely for charitable purposes, or for the benefit of the bank, or for the benefit of its officers? I guess it makes you question how this testimony came about. Crew has previously called out companies such as Comcast and Time Warner Cable for using affiliated charities in ways that seem to promote their proposed merger. Their charities honored a federal regulator who was considering their merger in 2014, even more explicit. At least one critic of OneWest's merger at the time asked regulators to investigate whether there was any connection between the foundation's donations to the nonprofits and their support for the merger, but there's no evidence the Fed looked. Meanwhile, opponents of the merger zeroed in on another source of support. The Fed received 593 petitions in support of the bank's request to forego a public hearing on the merger, forego it entirely, which could have slowed down the process, but all of the petitions came from Yahoo email accounts, even though Yahoo's share of the email market at the time was 3%, according to a letter to regulators from the California Reinvestment Coalition, an advocacy group that opposed the merger. That is a little weird. The letter claimed that when attempts were made to contact the 593 petitioners about their support, 30% of the emails bounced back. And other petitioners replied saying they did not, in fact, support the merger, according to the letter. In addition, many of the messages were time-stamped around 2 a.m. on the night of February 13th, 2015. There is no reasonable explanation for all these oddities, the California Reinvestment Coalition said in a letter, which was addressed to the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. Part of the department, Mnuchin is now being nominated to lead. There is, in fact, a little bit more, but we can't squeeze it all in. I recommend it to you. And, gee whiz, it's about time for us to start our outro music and let you know what's coming up on the after show, which usually is a fantastic collection of all the things that we failed to bring to you because we drilled down so hard on, well, look, I thought it was an interesting selection of stories. I hope you will too, by way of informing you what's coming up. Next, though, on Thursday's after show, which is the opportunity to say, thank God it's Giovedì, and we always love speaking Italian whenever we get the chance. Next up, the FBI says the agency won't be investigating letters sent to mosques threatening to cleanse the United States of Muslims. Interesting decision. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov takes a parting shot at the president, that is President Obama, while lavishing praise on Donald Trump. And HHS pick Tom Price belongs to a fringe group of anti-vax Tea Party doctors. What do you know? What do you think about that? Who believe Obama hypnotized voters into electing him twice. That sounds like a good bunch of docs. On the last half, they'll be reporting that the U.S. Supreme Court is divided on whether immigrants detained for more than 6 months while deportation proceedings take place are eligible for a hearing to seek their release. And the corporation that deports immigrants says there's a lot of money to be made in the Trump presidency. One of those private prison gangs, I would guess. All of that coming up next on the After Show.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show.
With David Waldman. ...
with Wink and Justice. Yes, that's the part I didn't get to squeeze in there. Do stay tuned for all of those stories and much more. We'll be back on Friday, and I'm looking forward to hopefully reestablishing our connection with Josie Duffy Rice, who at least one listener said ought to be looked to for counterpoint to the old ignore everything story.